It's no surprise to hear that manga and anime have taken the world by surprise in the last years and segmented its place as a mainstream form of media. It is also no surprise to know that there's a specific genre for all taste that go from romantic, everyday life, shonen, seinen, and why not, disturbing at some point. You may be familiarized with Junji Ito's collection of horror stories, Evangelion, Berserk, Hellsing, Serial Experiments Lain, or even other works like Genocyber and Devilman if you're a connoisseur. But what about those that are either a bit darker in tone, psychologically scaring, or disturbing to the point you would not even think about recommending it to a friend? You know, just like this one. Does it ring a bell? Well, I've got some right here that will make you question your life in many ways. Let's talk about them. Roll the intro. A World of Smiles, Egao no Sekai. Created by Misaki Kairi, Egao no Sekai feels to me like a manga version of Black Mirror, where every single chapter tells a different story with surprising and devastating twists. In order to not ruin you with spoilers, I would like to give you a heads up of the first chapter, which really resonated with me for personal reasons. The story follows the story of Rikako Ueda, a 5th grader that lives in a very dysfunctional house and just wants to live a happy and careless life. However, she still has to deal with major issues in her life, such as her negligent mother and her school. If you've ever been to school, you would know that it's inevitable to see bullying happening to students. After all, it's been a topic of discussion for years at this point, and for some reason, authorities still pretend to look the other way, pretending it never happened. This is a personal subject for me as a victim of bullying, so you can imagine why it feels disturbing to me. In World of Smiles, not only is bullying forgiven, but also encouraged. The reason for this reasoning is because by bullying those in the weakest positions, the ones in the stronger position can get rid of frustration and anger issues and live happily without worries. Sounds bad, right? Well, it gets worse. In the first chapter of the manga, it is mentioned right away that those who suffer from bullying can issue a suffering certificate where electrodes are placed in the human brain that nullify the pain and discomfort so that others can still continue to bully that kid. We are talking about a dystopian reality where the only way for a prosperous society to exist is for people to commit horrible acts of violence, mental distress, and other unimaginable acts against the weak, and these last ones never having the ability to complain or do something about it. But this won't apply to just the kids. Adults are included too. From teachers, regular everyday workers, parents, anyone who is at the lowest will become a punching bag for those that urge the feeling of torturing or inflicting pain on others. How does this chapter end? I'd rather not tell you, as the ending of this story will leave you with your mouth wide open after experiencing a void in your chest. The rest of the chapters that follow are equally disturbing, as it shows horrid realities for the main characters, who are mostly children experiencing horrible events that defy what a status quo should be. Out of the most disturbing concepts that I'm going to talk about, this is the latest one so far, so be ready for what comes next. The Horizon. Okay, I'm aware that I may be cheating a bit here, since this is not a manga, but a manhwa, meaning that it is not Japanese, but Korean instead. But The Horizon is a truly disturbing story because it shows a realistic post-apocalyptic world from the perspective of two children, a boy and a girl, that found each other after a virus overtakes the world and their parents perish during the incident. Created by Ji-hoon Young, this comic illustrates different realities that could happen if a scenario like this existed in real life, from cannibalism, civil war, tough choices, resilience, and other horrible moments that the protagonists have no options but to face. The most thrilling moment of this story, in my opinion, is when they encounter the old man who doesn't say any coherent word and simply follows the two children. His presence is eerie, doubtful, and questionable. The boy is always aware of his presence and doesn't trust him, putting a huge weight on his mind when it comes to choosing to kill or to let the worst happen to him and the girl. This only happens in the first arc of the story, so you can only imagine what could happen next. Not Simple. One of the shortest stories of this list, Not Simple, was written by Natsume Ono. The story is told through the findings of a journalist called Jim, who wrote a book called Not Simple about a guy named Ian, who might be a real person or not. The plot focuses on Ian's story from when he was a little kid to the day he is brutally stabbed in a restaurant. And no, this is not a spoiler, since this is just the first chapter of this manga. As you can see, this specific manga does not follow a traditional chronological order per se, but rather a set of events that happen at different moments that are scattered throughout the story, allowing the reader to find the links and understand how everything is directly connected to Ian. Sadly, Ian's story is tragic and terrifying. From neglectful parents, a sister in prison, tales of physical and mental abuse, abandonment, and very taboo issues that show the horrible traits of human nature, in which Ian falls little by little just for being born in this world in the wrong place and the wrong time. The only person Ian fully trusts is his sister, Kylie, who is unfortunately, as I mentioned previously, in jail for reasons I'd rather not say, so it won't spoil the story for you. The interesting part of this is that rather than being a psychological horror, I would call it realistic horror. You see, these may not have hypothetical scenarios of a world ending, a dystopian future with questionable morality, or monsters that would maul your face. This is something that could be happening to anyone in this very moment. Moments of loneliness, desperation, ostracism, and abuse that no matter ethnicity, religion, origin, or gender, abuse can happen to anyone. This story does not show anything graphic specifically, but does provide an insight through subtext the amount of pain and despair Ian is going through as he grows up. Definitely not a story for anyone susceptible to delicate content. Oyasumin Punpun. I am aware that this manga has become really popular in the latest years, and if you have read it already, then you know this will either lift your spirit or tear you to pieces. Created by the mastermind of Inio Asano, Goodnight Punpun follows the story of Punpun, a little bird-like creature that lives in a very realistic Japanese society and experiences traumatic moments through his life that shape the kind of person he ends up becoming. Remember when I said that Not Simple was disturbing because it could happen to anyone? Well, Punpun does the same thing but cranks it up to 11. Despite being full of abstract messages and imagery, Punpun does not fail to deliver a perfect representation of a very young kid whose psyche goes downhill even lower every single day. Not only that, but this manga shows how every single person can develop terrible human traits as they grow up without even noticing it. And Punpun is no exception. The interesting thing of this work is that anyone can relate to Punpun or any of these characters, even if we don't like what they are doing because it shows the reality of human nature. How do you go from a little kid dreaming about discovering a new planet to a true nihilistic and depressed young adult obsessed with the way your life is going? Punpun shows how we all felt at some point and is not afraid to explore the worst outcome as well. From turning into something unrecognizable that strays away from your former self to being held accountable for your actions and even seeing how not only Punpun but the rest of the characters are broken people. None of the actions that happen in Punpun are justifiable or acceptable, but that's not the point of the story. The point is that even though these are not good, they still happen, and we can see a clear insight of every character's mind as they process their experiences, from anger, regret, self-realization, traumas, you name it. For a manga whose main protagonist is a scribble of a little bird, I can say for sure that Punpun feels really human and real. Way too real, in my opinion, if you ask me. Belladona of Sadness. Directed by Eiji Yamamoto, Belladona of Sadness is the oldest of this list, as it is a Japanese adult animated film from 1973 with a unique art style that has not been replicated ever since. With a psychedelic aesthetic and lack of fear to show nudity or explicit scenes, Belladona of Sadness is not afraid to push boundaries when it comes to telling a story. The plot follows two characters, Shin and John, a couple living in rural France during medieval times. On Shin's wedding night, she is brutally gang-raped in a deflowering ritual by the local baron and his courtiers. She returns to John terrified, and he attempts to calm her by saying that they can start over from that moment. Shortly after they embrace, however, John strangles Shin to a state of unconsciousness. Ashamed, he flees outside their home. The plot is dark and horrifying already, but it only starts from here. After suffering these despicable actions, she starts seeing a creature-like spirit with a phallic-shaped head that promises her powers that can grow as much as she wants. With this, Shin becomes a powerful human who is both recognized and beloved by the townspeople, enraging the Baron in the process, who can't accept the fact that someone is more powerful or wealthy than him. Because of this, the spirit promises to raise her powers even more if she offers her body in return, meaning that she needs to get raped in the process. I don't want to go into more detail of this story as it's quite interesting and, for me at least, resembles a Shakespearean play for the symbolism and act development. The reason why this is disturbing, other than the plot, is because even though it is full of medieval fantasy, it's the imagery used in this movie that catches me off guard. From the surrealism, abstract imagery, and flashing constant lights in an animation that looks like it was made in a watercolor painting, joined by the experimental sound design, provide a different kind of experience that's not suited by everyone necessarily. Midori, the Camellia girl, Chika Gentō Gekiga. If Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom, is the Western epitome of graphically unsettling, then Chika Gentō Gekiga by Suehiro Maruo is the same concept in the East. To put it into perspective, this movie has been incited by the Japanese authorities to destroy original copies of it because of how hostile and crude it is. The story shows a young 12-year-old girl called Midori, who is forced to quit school and sell camellias to sustain her family after being abandoned by her father under the care of her mother. After a day of not selling a single camellia, she runs into a mysterious man who listens to her story and offers to buy all her flowers so she can make it to the end of the month, while also telling her that she can count on him if things get too difficult, giving her an address to go to when she needs it. After arriving at her home that same day to tell her mother the good news, she finds her mother dead, being eaten by rats, forcing the little girl to go to this mysterious address looking for a place to stay, which ends up being a freak show in a circus. And this is where things get truly disturbing. The moment she arrives to this circus, Midori experiences horrible events such as rape, animal cruelty, physical and mental abuse, and many other things, just to mention a few. That could easily summarize the entire story of this plot, but it does get more horrifying as the plot advances. We go from uncensored child physical exploitation, mutilation, abstract horror, and body dismemberment as other taboo topics as well. Just like Salo, as I mentioned previously, you will find yourself wondering why you even began watching this in the first place, as it does not have a kind or positive message. It tells a tragic story that may make you not want to see how it ends. Shin Gendai Ryoukiden. This one is the most heartbreaking. Shin Gendai Ryoukiden is a manga created by Waita Uziga that follows the story of Junko Furuta, a high school girl that gets kidnapped by a group of men that take her to an apartment where they proceed to do unimaginable things. I truly don't want to say what they do exactly to her, as the content of this manga is too explicit and revolves your stomach as you read it. But if I have to provide any data for the sake of informing people, I can say that it involves physical violence, rape, genital torture, and sodomy to a level that only a psychopath would do, all without showing any sort of censorship or subtext, all explicit in front of you. I will proceed to tell you the ending of this manga and you'll understand why. The girl ends up dying and they hide her corpse inside a cement block, which is later found by the police, leading them to arrest the criminals. The content of this manga is pretty gruesome and disturbing as it is, but you know what the worst part is? Remember when I said that Not Simple and Punpun show an outstanding level of realism in the stories? Well, it doesn't get any higher than this because this story actually happened. Junko Furuta was only 17 years old when this tragedy happened. She endured physical and mental torture daily for over a month until she was finally taken away by these criminals. This tragedy is considered the worst case of juvenile criminal activity in Japanese history even to this day, and every time I remember what happened to her, I personally get teary-eyed. This is the kind of story that makes you question your faith in humanity, and I assure you that I am not using these words carelessly. For some reason, a manga showing these explicit crimes were drawn in 2004 by Waita Uziga. Was it to help people understand the horror this girl went through? Was it to gain a profit from a real story? Was it for a good cause or a bad one? I am not entirely sure, to be honest. All I can say is that sometimes life can be as scary, if not scarier, than fiction. But when you combine the two and realize that atrocities such as this one actually happened and that the world was robbed from an innocent teen who had dreams and aspirations, you start thinking to yourself and question a lot of things.